Following World War II, the Cold War begins between Russia or the Soviet Union and the United States. In this presentation will talk about how the war started and how our countries fought back against each other. What we will learn today. We'll focus on the relationship between the Cuban Missile Crisis, our relationship with the Soviet Union, our relationship and how proxy wars began, and how did they change following the end of World War II. Thaw and freeze. So this language is used because the Cold War is called the Cold War because an official declaration against the Soviet Union never occurred. But if you look here, we'll see that when Khrushchev takes over in 1953, following Stalin's death, people were shocked because Stalin was this evil leader. He murdered millions of his own people, and Khrushchev decided to start this de-Stalinization program, which kind of pulled back the reins a little bit. So the thaw is starting to happen right here because Khrushchev is taking away those strict rules that Stalin had. Nixon, who was vice president at the time, comes to the Soviet Union. They have these debates, and really relationships start to get better. But this ends when the United States send a spy plane, the U-2 spy plane, into the Soviet Union in 1960, and with the Berlin Wall being built in 1961. You see here we have, this is Stalin. He is being kicked out with the rest of the Serbian and communist leaders, and Khrushchev is taking over. There's the kitchen debates. You have right here, you have Nixon. We'll talk about him more later. And then you have Khrushchev. And the U-2 spy plane was shot down, and that is what's going to start the official Cold War. The Cold War officially begins at the ending of World War II because of the dropping of the atomic bombs, but this is where we really see a lot of the aggression that happens between the Soviet Union and Russia. There's several American presidents that deal with this. We have here, you see JFK is going against Khrushchev, and they both have their hand on these atomic bombs to see who will set the bomb off first. And that was the whole idea of the Cold War, is that who is going to pull the trigger? Who is going to wipe this country off the map? And ultimately, no one ever does, but it is what causes these different events to occur during the 60s all the way up into the 1990s. In Cuba, we have a new character to bring in, Fidel Castro, who's right here with Nikita Khrushchev. He overthrows the Cuban government and starts a communist dictatorship. Very quickly becomes allies with the Soviet Union, which is not going to make America happy. America needs to be happy because if you see here on this map that Cuba is about 90 miles away from Florida. That's very close, almost too close for comfort for the American government, and we are going to respond by placing missiles in Cuba. Khrushchev, so JFK being our young president, he decides to send exiled Cubans back to Cuba to try to overthrow the government. This is called the Bay of Pigs. It happens in 1961. It is one of JFK's ultimate failures. It does not go as planned at all, and really kind of is a black mark on JFK's time as president. And so when that failed, America imposes an embargo on Cuba, which means no trade with Cuba, and that doesn't end until Obama becomes president. We just now started trading back with Cuba and just now started allowing people to travel into Cuba. In reaction to this, Castro's angry, rightfully so. He allows the Soviet Union to build a nuclear missile base in Cuba. Again, it's only 90 miles from Florida. Kennedy is going to respond very aggressively and demand that Khrushchev remove the missiles because he is basically saying, we have missiles here this close to America, and we can destroy you at any second of any day. You see here on the map, here's some of the missiles that were placed in Cuba in 1962. And then this is a map of where all the Soviet missiles were placed within Cuba. So if this was an actual map of the United States, Florida would be probably right about here, and it's about 90 miles away from each other. Okay. And if you look, these are the radiuses of the missiles. So if they shot one here, it would have this radius, and Washington, D.C. is included in that. And that's our capital. And typically when a capital is destroyed of a country, it becomes anarchy. And that was almost what the Soviets were trying to do, was create this anarchy type of government for the United States and destroy the democracy that was created. See here. If you continue to think of this as a brink, we're walking up to the line trying to decide. This was maybe one of the closest we've ever gotten to nuclear warfare. Khrushchev removes the missiles and promised to Kennedy that he would not invade Cuba. And the United States promised to remove the missiles that we had placed in Turkey. Turkey is very close to Russia, and that was our response to those missiles being placed in Cuba, was to place missiles in Turkey and point them towards the Soviet Union. And again, they were never shot off, but it was trying to see who is going to press the button first. And ultimately, neither leader pressed the button first. The Soviet oppression. So one thing that Americans had a problem with was the Soviet treatment of their fellow citizens. It has been very common. We've talked about it with Stalin. We've talked about it with other leaders, that the Soviets invade to try to create this one big country. And they ultimately do that. You see here. So they start in Hungary, which is very close to the Ukraine. So in 1956, the nationalists revolted against the Soviets. In response to this, Khrushchev is going to send in troops and tanks and kill, thousands of Hungarian people, all in the name of building the Soviet Union and creating this one Soviet country. You see here's the statue of Stalin that's been taken down in Warsaw. You see here, I have these tanks. And then the Soviets will come in and take over. And this is a country that is free, that is just near Russia. And when Khrushchev decides that the Soviet Union will stay large and stay massive, he decides to send in the military. Next country they go through is Czechoslovakia. In 1968, Czechoslovakians, they called for reforms and to try to remove less Soviet control. This is a big deal because countries don't like to be controlled by other people, specifically other countries. In response, the Soviet Union is going to send in troops to occupy the country, overthrow the government, and restore that dictatorship. So imperialism, we've talked about this before, never works. It's not going to work for the Soviet Union in the long run either. See here, here's Czechoslovakia again. You have the Soviet troops coming in, making it almost a war zone in this small country near its borders. Czechoslovakia, again, here's a freedom fighter, and these are the Soviet troops. So the whole time the Cold War is going on, the United States is kind of sitting back and watching, because we cannot get involved with these wars. We are not in the position. We have a lot of things going on in our own country in 1968 at the time, but we are ultimately going to go to war, not specifically with the Soviet Union, but with allies of the Soviet Union. And those are called proxy wars, and we will talk about those tomorrow.